Okay, so we will go ahead and get
Covering
started.
for Zoe, by the way.
Sorry, Lakshmi, what were you saying?
I just said I'm covering for Zoe today.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, looking at the participant list, I think generally these are the same folks that have been on the call. We do have a newcomer, so I wanted to welcome Mr. Derek Hendon. He is from the Clark County School District. We've worked together in a few different capacities over the years now, so obviously makes sense for him to be joining us on the Education and Outreach Working Group. Derek, I know that the folks from NDEP have given you a little bit of information on PSN, correct? In terms of what the broader group is about?
Not a whole lot. I'm still pretty new to this.
Okay. So I'll give you sort of the 10,000 foot view, and if anybody from NDEP needs to correct me, they can virtually slap me on the hand. So PSN, Partners for Sustainable Nevada, is a conglomerate of public, private, non-governmental organizations, all focused on trying to improve sustainability in Nevada as a whole. So PSN is then broken out into different working groups, all tasked with tackling a different facet of sustainability, whether it's policy change and funding, source reduction, a number of other things. And then our particular working group is education and outreach. So I think that we have a very meaningful task ahead of us in the near future, but what we're going to be aimed at doing is trying to make sure that we're getting education and outreach to the public, to the private individuals that are making decisions at the government level to really shape sustainability for the state of Nevada. So obviously it's in the title, education, right? So having representation from our different school districts around Nevada are going to be paramount in making sure that once we start to develop content, you know, finding a way that we can create some synergy to then get this information out to people that, you know, it weaves sustainability in the fabric of, you know, of our state, right? We look at other states, California, Washington, Oregon, those places, sustainability is really at the forefront of, you know, people and their habits. So we want to try to shift that in Nevada to maybe mirror, you know, maybe some of these states in terms of their sustainability efforts. So does that kind of give you a little bit of a snapshot as to what PSN's about?
Yes, actually it does.
Okay, cool. So again, thank you for joining, Derek, and then everyone else joining again. Today, the big topic at hand is what we've tried to tackle a number of times on previous calls, which is, you know, when we start developing content and material, where ultimately are we going to push people towards? And so that has been that website that Kim and myself have mentioned a number of times. So NDEP is going to provide us a little bit of an update in terms of some of the capabilities on their end. They did share the Nevada Recycles website, where we're potentially going to be hosting some of this information. We've got some limitations that we'll be working around, but that's where our group, we really need to take a look at, you know, what we have and how we can make it work. So without further ado, I don't know if Bree or Kayla, any of you in particular are going to be tackling that?
Yeah, I will. Okay. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we met with our IT department on what physically can be changed and altered on the site without having to go back to the web development company. So the structure, so like these boxes you see here, they're pretty much set in the code. It's not something that can be changed easily, but we can change the images, the wording, the text, where the links go. So that's an option depending on, you know, how we envision this site working for PSN. And there's a few things NDEP may need to keep on this site, and just figuring out where those things need to live, and if they need to be separated from PSN or not. That's something we're still looking at. But yeah, so anything where there's like a physical box, for the most part, has to remain there, but we can really update the content. There's a section for, updates on what's going on that we could utilize. And we were told that we can make new pages and everything, or if we need to update some of these pages, that's another thing we can do as well. So yeah, on our end, we're figuring out what content needs to stay, and where it may not necessarily have to stay on this front page, but it's just something we're looking at.
Okay, so I have some questions myself. I know that the broader group will probably have some as well, and I really want us to try to take a look at this in its entirety and figure out what makes the most sense. So not all questions can likely be answered today, because for NDEP's sake, I'm sure some of the questions I know that I have at least are probably going to require them to go back to the IT department and see what is possible and what is not. So Bree, are you able to just backtrack us to the main NDEP site? Because I have a question from there. So if you just take out the, yeah. So my question would be, given some of the limitations that you just explained that exist on the Nevada Recycles page, is there feasibility to create a separate tab where, land, water, air, environmental cleanup, and recycle, one specifically for PSN? As I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, I think it'll work, that if we have to live within the recycle page, but if there's a way to specifically call out PSN, so that way if people are looking for general sustainability resources, they don't get misled because they say, oh, that's only talking about recycling, and I'm looking for something as it pertains to mining or energy or gas. So again, I understand you may not be able to answer that now, but that may be something that is conducive for us to track down, because then potentially what we could do is take the framework that exists within the recycle page and then mirror the functionality or the user interface of that a little bit and just sort of replicate it on the PSN page and then build out the content from there. So that may be a no. It may be something that you have to go back to the web developer, because that is a pretty heavy lift, but just something to consider, at least from my curiosity. I know, Alexia, you put a link in the chat.
Eric, that's the link to the PSN page. I just thought it would be helpful if you wanted to read through it, if you hasn't already.
I still had this window open. So, yeah.
I also had, a comment to make about the website.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so obviously I would like to agree with what you were just saying about adding, PSN, but maybe because land, water, air, and environmental cleanup, cover a lot of what NDEP does. Recycling could be added, and then maybe something that has to do with minerals or raw materials, because I think that that's a very, very, very relevant part of Nevada. And that's also a relevant part of sustainability, whether it be recycling lithium batteries or mining, or something like that. And how are mines doing these things sustainably? Would it be possible to add something like that, like precious metals or raw materials or something like that?
So Alexia, I know all of the mining goes under the land section, but I think we can certainly, explore how can we expand maybe that area, or maybe can we provide some more information on that sustainability recycling page, or change just recycle to sustainability. But I just know as a whole, I think we're going to get a lot of pushback from changing the whole NDEP page. But we can change just about whatever we want on the Nevada Recycles website.
Oh, understood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
no,
so actually, as I'm reading your comment, Kayla, that may be feasible too. If NDEP has the appetite for it, rather than just having a specific call out for recycle, change it to the broader topic of sustainability, and then that's where, like Alexia said, we can have specific call outs, and that's in my mind at least. What we would have is these sort of subcategories that live within a broader page, so someone can find, and this maybe it needs to be changed to again, sustainability. You'll have to then address your vanity link at the top, where you're typing in ndep.nevada.gov/Nevada Recycles. It'll be the NDEP portion /sustainability. You can reference that when you're having conversations with people. They can come here, and then within the subcategories, they can find those topics. And maybe this is where it starts to get a little bit muddy, right? Because I'm sure NDEP, you guys have requirements, like you were saying, on what has to stay on here. And it's likely a lot of the content is geared around recycling, and I don't want I'm biased. Obviously, I want to talk about recycling because that's my wheelhouse. That's what my company does. But I don't want it to be the big elephant in the room that takes center stage when we're trying to talk about other topics. So I think we need to try to kind of track down, what absolutely has to stay on this page, and then maybe start working things around, what can we add to call out mining, energy, gas, water, and then start to work out what the content looks like for each of those pages. So does anybody have any difference of opinion or maybe insight as to what they maybe have seen work, if you've seen something else, some other resource?
one thing I do want to bring up. So when we met with IT yesterday, one idea that was getting thrown around was rebranding, this whole thing to Sustainable Nevada or something like that. And maybe a way possibly to go about this is figuring out what PSN needs a website for. It's not a question of if we need it, we do. But what we need it for, and kind of planning that section out. And then we figure out what we need to keep, and we merge these ideas together and figure out a way to make it fit, at least in the short term, on this website, if we don't want to get too stuck on the structure for right now.
No, I think you're right on that. And, that's where I think maybe we need to start digging into, the menu of options that you guys have asked for from other groups. And so for those that aren't familiar, the menu of options is really determining what our goals are as a group. And I know we've talked about a number of things, and, my big emphasis has been on the framework, because I sort of like to work my way backwards and having, okay, when we know what we're about and what we're going to do, where is this ultimately going to live? I like to have that on the front end, so then we can kind of build around it. But I think we need to, as a group, really determine what our goal with education and outreach is, because there's going to be a lot of topics. There's a lot of different industries that are represented here, but with all those working groups, I've been on a number of those calls. I know Kim has been on a number of them. Bree and Kayla, I think you're on every single one of them, so I don't envy you. But, everybody has had this commonality where they say, okay, messaging, right? And everybody wants to talk about how they message getting funding, how they drive policy change, how are we going to hit source reduction, and everything ultimately circles back to what our group is tasked with. And so it can get very daunting and overwhelming because there's so many different topics. And I think we need to narrow exactly what we think will be valuable for the broader group. So this may be something better suited for the poll, but I'd be happy to have open dialogue on those things. Think about it over the coming weeks. Kim, I know you raised your hand. Did you have something that you wanted to jump in before I went down that rabbit hole?
Sure, and I kind of just wanted to bring up a different, not necessarily different perspective, but as we're talking about creating a specific platform to drive traffic to access different resources, whatever that may look like. I also wanted to point out, you know, particularly our organization, since we are a nonprofit, we put a lot of work into driving people to visit our own page, which I assume, you know, is a similar situation with other nonprofits or other agencies and things like that. And so I wouldn't want this to create some kind of conflict, because if I'm thinking of it from our stance, I don't want there to be any, not necessarily competition, but I would want to be careful about how, you know, the most appropriate way to utilize this state platform within our region without avoiding traffic coming back to our personal organization. And so I think this might also, you know, go down a broader conversation around the types of resources and again, the type of materials that we're wanting to promote through the NDEP web page, and how that corresponds within different regions and all of that. But I just did want to kind of voice that a little bit, because that's been something that we've been talking about internally, because, you know, we would want to help support this initiative, but we also need to be careful with, you know, our own resources and our own platforms as an organization.
I would tend to agree with you on that. And I think that's where, as the broader group, we really, again, this is a little bit muddy, and I myself will admit that I'm trying to figure out, you know, the best way to navigate this. You know, maybe what it comes down to is, you know, a centralized resource page. You know, through Partners for Sustainable Nevada, you can go in there and maybe there's a, you're talking about regionality, right? Maybe you can look in the particular region that you're researching from, click on that, and then within there you can find pertinent resources to, you know, A, the topic you're interested in, but B, you know, the specifics of that topic within your area. I know that I know Republic, I know NDEP already has some, you know, I know the county, which Sam, I forgot to call you out. I think this is I don't know if you jumped on a meeting before, I'm going to call you out in a second, but from the county, you know, Clark County, there's a lot of great resources that exist out there. And I think personally, the driver behind this, you know, PSN page is just trying to get awareness to the resources that already exist. I don't think that we need to come here and reinvent the wheel, come up with completely new recycling curriculum or completely new, you know, lesson plans around energy, but we need to try to find a way to centralize information so it's very easy for people to find. And that may be driving people to Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful resources page. But I think that's where maybe the group should start thinking about, how do we best centralize and pool all of this information so it's easy and digestible for people. Is that kind of aligned with what you were trying to get at? Okay.
More of like a library of resources.
Exactly, something like that. Again, because I think maybe I painted a different picture at the beginning where I was trying to make it sound like we got to come in and completely create all new resources. I think the biggest thing is to try to just centralize it and make it easy to find. Alexia, I'm going to call on you in a second, but also Sam, I warned you I was going to call you out. Sam, if you wanted to introduce yourself. I don't remember exactly what your title is, but I know you're working on sustainability over at Clark County. So again, something we talked about in this group, representation, right? Representation from people like Mr. Hendon over at the school district and some of our folks from the municipalities. This is where we can, again, start pulling from resources that exist, make sure that we're aligned with, you know, local specifics. So Sam, you want to give a little brief intro on who you are, what you're about?
Yeah, so my name's Sam Baker. I am the Sustainability Program Administrator for Clark County. I've been here just since July. So I'm excited to be a part of this working group because I'm actually from South Florida. So, you know, learning about what the state is doing is really important to me. And I love the idea of these working groups because I feel a really big divide between the North and the South. So I'm excited to be able to, you know, bridge that a little bit. And as far as what I do, I'm working on all of our different sustainability initiatives. Our main one is all in Clark County. And so we have a sustainability and climate action plan for county operations that's been in place since February. So we're working on implementing those actions. And then we are working on a community plan for Clark County. And that's, really involving a lot of different stakeholders right now. We're in the planning process. And then, trying to make sure that we have something equitable that we can put forth to the community that's going to reduce greenhouse gases, but also, keep our economy flowing and keep that social equity. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Sam, and appreciate you being here. I know that you'll be a great resource for the group as well, so appreciate you making yourself available. Lexia, I know you had your hand raised for a little while, so sorry to keep you waiting.
That's okay. Thank you. Hi, Sam. Nice to meet you. I wanted to maybe add some tools to what we're trying to achieve. And I put a link in the comments for the UN's SDGs. And they have a really simple kind of approach to doing what it sounds like we're attempting to do, where they've sort of defined all of their, I think they have 17 goals, for sustainability. And then within each of those goals, they have sort of a clearinghouse of who on the planet, are directly involved in helping achieve those goals. So to kind of speak to what Kim was mentioning, without taking away from the people that are on the ground doing the work, it might be a really good idea as an educational website to do something similar to what the UN has done with the SDGs, maybe just as a model, as you said, Jeremy, not to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I like that. And, this particular model was brought up once before. It may have been yourself, actually, that I think called it out. I think that you're right. It sort of gives the snapshot or that, really high level view in terms of what the topic is about. So, I would encourage everybody to maybe take a look at it. Not everything, may, be particularly what the state is trying to do. We need to maybe look at these categories because there's a lot of them, right? You said there's 17 of them. I'm looking at it myself right now, So I think maybe what we do is we try to identify what is most pertinent to Nevada. And then within that, maybe that's how we somewhat mirror how the information is presented to people. So I do like it, and I would encourage people to take a look at it and maybe start thinking about how we can make that our own. But yeah, I don't want this to get confused with, again, reinventing the wheel. And I think that we just need to figure out, the best way to host that. It's going to be a large pool of information. And then we also need to just start compiling what resources we have and then the best way to organize them. So I think that's a great point. Anybody else have any opinions, insights? Looking in the comments. Nothing on that. Okay, so my big thing would be, again, NDEP, you guys figuring out what exactly we can remove, so we know, what sort of bandwidth we're working with. And then from there, I don't know the best way about it, because I'm trying to think of how a poll would look in terms of, coming up with our, I'm going to call them our key topics, right? If we want to talk about how the UN has their model, what are our key topics going to be? And I would really think that because of the limitations that we have on the NDEP website, we can't go as expansive as the UN. And that's where I kind of say, we need to really hone in on particular, I'm thinking it's probably gonna fall into like, well, we do have to keep it into 4 categories, right? If it's those 4 little cards, those call out cards on the NDEP website, maybe one has to be like resource management, and that's talking about, recycling, waste, resource management. I'm sorry, you guys, this is how I spitball. I often stare off in the distance and sometimes don't make sense to myself. I'm just trying to think of what these 4 calling cards could be, right? Because we've got, water resources, energy resources, waste, mining falls into its own particular category, and I just want to make sure that everybody is accurately represented, and it's not a category that maybe excludes somebody by default just because of the way that it's worded. So I think maybe what we'll do is come up with a poll on some of those topics, and I think we need to draw it down to 4 topics, and then NDEP, you guys have to let us know on those 4 cards. Can we utilize those 4 cards? Are we limited to 3? You know, we need to know exactly, again, what we can pull off of there and what we can replace it with. Alexia, you had your hand again, right? Or is that old?
Yeah, sorry, I feel kind of obnoxious now.
No, not at all.
One of the other working groups, I think it's the policy and funding group. The last time we met, we also did sort of like a live poll.
I'm gonna go on my lunch and then I'll head back to the library.
Tara, welcome, but can you mute yourself?
We did basically the same thing that we're talking about here, but about, you know, the variety of sustainability needs specifically for Nevada. I don't know if that list would be helpful to us here. We don't have the complete list yet. We're waiting until we meet again. But I just wanted to make mention of that because I think that it would be helpful, at least to some degree. It might not be only 4 categories. There might be more than 4 categories, but we're trying to identify what specifically in Nevada as a whole entire state, not just Southern or Northern, but as a whole state, what is the most meaningful, you know, sustainability for us? What does that look like? So I'm just putting that on the table for future.
No, I think that list would be helpful for us to take a look at, and then that's where we're going to be potentially tasked with rolling them up into broader categories, right? So I think personally, I think that list would be good for all of us to look at, and then we can potentially derive a poll from that to create those major categories where then a lot of those topics will potentially live under. So I know I would like to see it. I don't know how the broader group feels about it. All these blue screens nodding at me. That might be the coffee making my eyes cross. I don't know. Okay. Well, I would like to see it. Go ahead, Kim. Sorry.
I was just going to point out, I do like what Skylar's comment in the box. Don't know, Skylar, if you wanted to elaborate more on how we could organize the information by audience.
I guess I was just trying to think of it from the point of view of somebody coming to visit our site, and whether maybe it's a student / teacher or a business or a municipality looking for certain resources that could be geared towards them. Then they could go on, and maybe those would be the 4 boxes on the front. And then from there, they could be further broken down into each topic. I don't know, that was just another way of visualizing how that could work.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. I think that the challenge is the limitations on the user interface, right? And that's something, what you brought up specifically, it's very important, and I think we need to integrate that. It's just how we actually do it that's going to be the challenge, because we talked about early on in one of the earlier meetings, education segmenting, right? We were talking about identifying those groups. Is it public? Is it private? Is it, you know, a kid or a teacher, right? So we needed to come up with those categories. But how are we going to deploy that, right? And maybe you're right. Maybe that's where we create a poll and see is, you know, are we just putting all resources under, you know, these 4 hats, and they're divided by, you know, educators, businesses. I'm going to share my screen because this is something that we actually do on our Recycling Simplified page, because it is important for people to be able to navigate and find something that's for them, right? If I'm an educator, I don't really care about the moving parts of policy, right? And I don't want to get lost in the sauce of trying to find something that's relevant to me. I'm looking for something quick and digestible. So can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Right. So this is where, you know, we go in here and we talk about resources, right? I have a particular call out for educators because for me, that's where I get a lot of bang for my buck. But resources, right? I can go under here and I'm looking at a residential resource versus something that's pertinent for the city, a business, and then media, because we do a lot of media outreach. So maybe, you know, we come up with something like that where we start to then segment that content. But again, we need to think about how are we most impactful on the front end, right? If I'm going to this, you know, ndep.gov/Partners for Sustainable Nevada, and I'm particularly looking for mining information, I'm going to see exactly, okay, here's mining. I click on that, and then maybe within that, there's a pool of resources that's built out for educators. There's a pool that's built out for a municipality, right? So maybe that's how the structure works. Open for interpretation, suggestions, whatever, but I just think that the topic should be front and center, and then how we build that out in terms of audiences maybe is secondary. That's my opinion, but I'm open to other people and their opinions on that.
And one thing too to add, we can, on the Nevada Recycles page, we can change the menu items too. So if we can't fit everything in those 4 boxes, we can use the menu up at the top.
You're talking about the banner at the top?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so that's where I think we all should really take a look at this page, navigate through it a little bit, and imagine some of the, you know, the content being geared towards what we're trying to achieve, but see how that potential build out will look. So then when we come back for the next meeting, hopefully we'll have that answer on, you know, below what has to stay, what can go, and then maybe we can really start narrowing down that content. I know that this is a lot of, and I apologize, this is a lot of spinning wheels, but sometimes this is how that, I'll call it, creative process works on making sure that we're conducive in what we're putting out. But I still think it's good conversation nonetheless. Okay. Yes, Kim?
So I also wanted to bring up, so as we start to build out this like library of resources, I almost also wonder if we'll start identifying resource gaps within our states and our communities, and if that could then potentially lead to like development of particular types of resources. So thinking long term, because I feel like the pool of resources is just so different, and the needs of our community and our state and the different parts of our states are just so different that we're going to have that take that into consideration, as well as we're identifying these resources and what works for different parts of our region, and then what's missing from that part of our region. And I actually did like the map of the state that Nevada Recycles currently has, because maybe that's something else we can discuss further along if we're trying to provide resources for different audiences. I think that could also take into account different like parts of the state as well. And if you're a person hopping onto that page and you're like, well, I'm in Washoe County or I'm in Clark County, like what type of information is available for me in my own kind of county? That could be something else that we could look into.
No, 100. I would agree with you 100% on that. And I'm gonna, just so everyone knows exactly what you're talking about, share that screen. You know, personally, and this is more of a, can you guys see the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that long term, right, talking about that long term goal, it would be nice to be able to hover over, you know, a particular area. You know, there's a headline and it's not how to recycle, it's, you know, local information, right? You can come over here and I can click on Clark County, and when I go to Clark County, it's going to pull up county relevant information, right? Whereas then if I hover somewhere else, I don't know what grade level I was supposed to learn all this. I don't know all the counties, but you know, you hover over your particular county, right? And it pulls up particular information for you. And, you know, generally speaking, there will be some very broad topics that are relevant to the state as a whole, but I would like to see, to Kim's point, easy navigation of, where you are and how that information affects you directly, and how you can drive sustainability in your area. So I would like to see that for sure. Alexia?
Hello. I just a thought, kind of off topic a little bit, but talking about that map, Kim, I don't know if it's possible, but if it is, it would be really interesting to have an interactive map of Nevada that also provided some statistical information about each region, population, percentage of recycling, percentage of energy use, those types of things. And the reason that I think that might be an interesting thing to add to the website is because it kind of creates some friendly competition within the state as a whole, where each different region, or each, however you want to describe it, it might just be a useful tool to create engagement with the public, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it would also be a very useful tool to park some of that sort of information on the website, for students, I think, especially as a sort of one-stop shop for that kind of information.
So I would agree with you there. I think that this is where it'll carry over to something that Kim said in terms of identifying gaps, because not all reporting across the state is uniform. And I think there will be a lot of gaps in that data. And this is something, don't mean to call you out specifically, Sam, but the project that Sam's working on, right? That has relevancy to what you were just talking about, Alexia, because they're actually trying to capture a lot of that data. So they have a really good idea of where they stand in this, this big sustainability bubble, and how they can make improvements, where they need to make improvements. So I think that, if that was a functionality on here, I think that there would be a lot of information missing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think that there's a lot of information that just is not required to be reported by certain agencies, and so then it just won't be represented, and there'll be some really big data gaps. But maybe that's something that through this process we can work, and that may actually be something, I'm not suggesting that we go make policy on it, but that might be something that goes into policy change, right? Better reporting, better requirements for reporting. A lot of these things are, it's just purely self-report, right? There's no fallout if you don't put your data in there. And so, there's a lot of stuff that's underrepresented or just not represented at all. So, yeah. Lakshmi, you had your hand up?
I was just thinking, perhaps, since we do have different work groups, like the one source reduction and policies and organics management, I was wondering if each of us could have some, like a section where we want to, provide some information on educational kind of material to be posted as part of the overall sustainable Nevada PSN page. That way, all the effort we're doing could be also put towards that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that there's absolutely value within that, but we just have to be mindful of sort of the bandwidth that we have with this page itself, and we have to be very tactful in how we, place information on there. And that's where, we need to, myself, Kim, as the, chair and co-chair, we'll really try to be present on a lot of those calls and then meet those needs, for what you guys are trying to put out. We don't want to flood the page with too much information, where, the core messaging or the core, intent of what the page is about gets lost because we're talking about, particular policy change. That may be something that, policy might be something that needs to stay a little behind the scenes. And, I'm just trying to think of, how we don't flood NDEP with too much information. We really just have to be tactful in how we're, we're putting messaging out there. And I know our group sort of, I consider our group as sort of this like supporting role for a lot of the other working groups. And we just need to figure out how we do our best to filter the relevant information to give that to the people that are trying to find that information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe possible that because I didn't attend the previous meeting, I'm sitting in for Zoe, maybe I missed something here. So is the purpose of this website more about the key thing is recycling and not about the other? So that's
no. That's what we're trying to shift, because the website right now it's right recycling and everything recycling. So we're trying to figure out how. I know you're chair of the source reduction group, right? But that part of your content may live within the waste management sector, right? We're talking about waste and recycling. Well, that's important, but as a facet of that, we need to talk about reducing our waste, right? We don't have bandwidth to have, 10 different categories talking about source reduction, policy change, XYZ, then having every industry represented: energy, gas, water, air, mining, recycling, right? So what I'm trying to do, I think what Kim and I are trying to do is try to compress this to broad categories where when something relevant fits into it, it'll live with under that. And that's where, like, again, your guys' group as source reduction is very important, but it might need to live under, waste management, right? Or some category that calls out that. And I know source reduction is not purely on waste, right? So we have to figure out, does it make sense to, have information on source reduction for each topic, right? Because source reduction, again, it's not just on consumer goods, not just my aluminum can, right? It's also reducing the amount of water you use. It's reducing the amount of energy that you use. So there's a lot of topics, a lot of really important topics. And I think that's where, again, we might be a little bit of herding cats for a little while, trying to figure out who we are and what we're doing. I know my brain's all over the place, but there's a lot of important information we just have to figure out. And I think that's our biggest task, figuring out the best way to compress it and make it easy and digestible and user-friendly for people trying to get that information. Does that answer it? It's not solely on recycling.
I guess, yeah. I think the most relevant thing is maybe changing the thing from Nevada Recycle to PSN. Maybe that's the helpful, because that's what was confusing on the page that was presented. So anyway. Got
it. Okay. Yep. That's part of the broader approach, that we're going to rebrand this sustainability, right? And then all those other facets live within that. Alexia?
Okay, thanks.
And I guess this is a question for Brianna. Is it possible to create a blog page? Well, I guess the first question is, who maintains the content of this website, and is it a regularly occurring thing? And then the second question would be, is it possible to create a blog page where organizations throughout Nevada could upload a paper or a study they've done in sort of a research-centered place?
So I don't know about the blog. Maybe Skylar, you may have a little more information on that. And as for maintaining it, that is on our end. Skylar, are we able to do a blog? Is there a blog functionality on this?
Yeah, so currently that would be similar to like our events tab that we have right now. So we actually, it almost seems like it should be like a calendar of events, but it's actually pretty much blog style, where we just post about, community campaigns, or we do like community spotlights, stuff like that. So I believe that structure would support, a blog section, as you can see. Is that what you're thinking of, Alexia?
Yeah, I think in general, I guess my thinking was that, all of the, like Truckee Meadows, for example, could, I don't know, send a request to you to please upload the report that they just published on the river, or, you know, or something like that, rather than a calendar of events. But I guess in the calendar of events, you could just put a link that would take whoever was doing this, you know, looking, that would take the person to Truckee Meadows website, for example, which I think that would work too. I guess I'm trying to create a scenario where the organizations and agencies in Nevada that are doing the work on the ground, that this website can link back to them, and that can also provide, you know, a lot of ability to do research on the public's behalf.
Yeah, I mean, those could, if we decide that that's what we want to do with that section, those could be showcased under the news and events. And then there's even like subcategories that we can connect them to, so they can be organized. So like right now it's like general education, community spotlight. There's a couple more, but we could change those to maybe, you know, the type of, you know, land, water, air, I don't know, whatever you guys want those titles to be, but they can be categorized as well. So people can go to the drop-down menu and say, I want to read, you know, all of the news on water, work being done in water, and then it would pop up all of those. So, and then in terms of the website, I maintain the website right now. So yeah, and NDEP would have to maintain the ownership over the website, and there probably is zero chance that they would let other organizations go directly in there and make changes, because it shares the same web editor with the rest of the website, NDEP website. So the way that would have to work is, yeah, you guys would just email it to me, and then I would format it and post it on the website.
And I think that it's no insult to anybody, but I think it's better off that way, because we need to have it to be, you know, somewhat moderated, where, you know, not anybody can post anything on there, right? It has to be relevant and it has to be vetted, because this isn't it's not Facebook, right? We're not just posting things just because, you know, we feel that is relevant. It needs to really align with what PSN's about, but ultimately, because this is housed on NDEP, it needs to be conducive to NDEP's broader mission. So I think that it is important that you guys obviously maintain ownership of that. And I think that that's why originally, when we were talking about options before we even knew, you know, that we could use the existing framework, that's where, you know, advocating for NDEP to still be tied to it, it carries a little bit of weight, a little bit of legitimacy, right? And so we just need that sort of check and balance. I'm going to call that a check and balance, right? Okay. All right. Well, we're rounding the end of the meeting, and I know there's a lot of probably deeper conversations to be had. I would, again, challenge everybody to take a look at the site and start brainstorming on these things. That list, Alexia, that you mentioned from the policy change group, I would really like to take a look at that. And then, you know, maybe Kim and I can come up with a poll for the group to determine, you know, maybe our main categories, and then what things will live within those. I think that would be a good next step for us. And then we can really start to outline, you know, the menu of options, what we're really trying to achieve by all this, right? Because we can talk about all the great content, but, you know, what's the point, right? Are we just trying to raise awareness? Are we trying to, you know, decrease the usage of X material, water, energy, right? So I think we need to clearly define what E&O is trying to achieve. So any questions, comments, concerns? Nope. Okay, well, you got a lot of time to think about it, because I know my schedule is quite jam-packed for the month of December, and then I will be taking some much-needed time off. So likely the next meeting will take place sometime in January. I'll go ahead and get with Kim, and we'll come up with a couple dates for January, and then we'll reconvene. Hopefully, we'll have some answers on what can be removed from this site, and give us a little bit better idea on our bandwidth and capabilities of what we can do, and hopefully get a poll out by then, and then really start to dive into some of this stuff, and you guys don't have to listen to me talk in circles.
Got it.
All good?
Very good, Jeremy. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Well, hope everyone has a great holiday. And then if I don't speak to any of you before then, Happy New Year.
Awesome.
Thank you.